Good evening, Marlboro County Board of Education Budget Workshop, February 5th, 2018 is called to order. Mr. Coachman, would you please have an invocation for us?
Grace and eternal God and Father, Lord, I ask you to go with us today as we go to take care of the business of the district. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for watching over us over the days, oh God. I ask you, Heavenly Father, unite us, oh Heavenly Father, as a board and as a community. Continue to protect our children all around the world. In all the blessings I do pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Mr. Coachman. There's been notice of the media, and the Marlboro Herald is represented. And we need approval of the workshop agenda, please. It's not worded quite like that, but we need approval of what we're doing.
So moved. I approve.
All right, is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And Mr. Park, would you... Oh, closer? Okay, sorry. Mr. Park, would you please give us the first view of the fiscal year 2018-19 budget?
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Lane. You have before you the first budget workshop for fiscal year 18-19. And this workshop is going to focus on staffing standards, school configurations, and student population. And we hope that this is going to be a very interactive session. Feel free to ask questions as we go and include whatever discussion you'd like as we work through the various slides. I think this is a really important first step with the budget process. We know that certainly it has the most significant budget impact within our general fund. First slide. Take a look at staffing standards, and I think one of the questions we want to ask is, why do we want to evaluate these standards? And certainly our role is to equitably distribute the human resources throughout the district through the budget process. We know that there are some significant financial and academic reasons to evaluate staffing. When we look at general fund, 85% of the cost of our general fund budget relates back to salaries and benefits. Next. School configurations. Why are we trying to evaluate school configurations? We know that we need to most efficiently staff and administer our resources throughout the district, and the school configurations have a lot to do with efficiency and the cost of those various operations. We know that we've got financial as well as academic reasons. We're looking at student populations. We need to be able to best staff our schools and serve our students. And start out by evaluating what our current enrollment is and where those students are located. This is as of January 31, 2018. So these are some very recent numbers. Give you an idea, this is the first time that we have seen a budget where we had less than 4,000 pre-K through 12 students. And you can see, starting off, Bennettsville Primary School, we've got 464 kids, and that includes the kindergarten through second, pre-K, as well as the developmentally delayed, which we've got 31 of those students. When we look at...
Mr. Park, this is our current numbers,
This
correct?
is our current numbers, and this is as of January 31, 2018. Look at school configuration. I think you all are familiar with how we're configured, but what I've done is just kind of restated that. Bennettsville Primary, of course, is a pre-K through second. That's early childhood. Bennettsville Intermediate School is 3rd and 4th grade, with 5th and 6th grade self-contained. Blenheim Elementary Middle is pre-K 8 through 8th grade. Wallace is pre-K through 8th grade. Clio is pre-K through 5th. McCall is pre-K through 8th. School Discovery, of course, is our 6th to 8th grade magnet. And the high school is 9th to 12th grade next.
Now, let me ask you a question. So
Yes,
you stating this, continue to have in a 5th grader from Bennettsville at Clio?
All this is information the way we are right now. There's
Okay.
no recommendations that are being made. I think certainly that's a discussion as we work through the budget process.
Okay.
Okay, next. When you look at those school configurations, you can see, of course, the primary school is early childhood, the intermediate school is elementary. When we look at Blenheim, we have early childhood, elementary, and middle. Wallace, the same. Clio is early childhood and elementary. McCall is early childhood, elementary, and middle. Of course, School Discovery is middle, and high school is high school. So that gives you an idea of some of the challenges that we have when you start looking at providing instruction, particularly in our pre-K-8 configurations. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we have with our current configuration, and this is just for discussion. It doesn't. There's no recommendations or anything that's coming out of this session. And one of the things that we find is that with our small schools, we only have one class at several grade levels, and what that does is it means that teachers of the same grade level, there's a lack of collaboration within their school. So that's one of the challenges I think a lot of our teaching staff finds in these smaller schools. We also know that there's increased administrative costs on a per pupil basis when you look at our smaller school configurations. We look at middle school in terms of sports. That can be a real challenge. A number of our schools weren't able to put together actually a team, and so that is certainly a challenge with middle school sports.
Mr. Parks, I'm going to have to back up just 1 second.
Yes, sir.
You're listing the school configurations as pre-K through 8th grade, but yet on this list, I don't have pre-K numbers. I have K numbers. So each school is going to have the pre-K as you're listing, so that's going to be basically about 20
It's
more.
actually, when we look at the spreadsheet, the pre-K is below the total K-8.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
It is separately stated, and one of the reasons why it's separately stated is we receive specific funding for K-12, but not necessarily pre-K or the developmentally delayed.
Thank you.
It's a different type. Yes, sir.
And is 20 still the magic number for pre-K?
It is. 20, and of course, a teacher and an assistant. Okay. We look at gifted and talented. There's a challenge a lot of times with when we look at transportation issues and being able to provide that at a particular school location because the numbers are, many times are very small. So that becomes another challenge. Looking at things like 8th grade honor program, providing Algebra 1 and English 1 requires that that teacher may end up having to do a lot of traveling in order to provide that type of instruction.
One question I have on that, I know Wallace did this. They only had 2 children who were taking Algebra 1, which is
Yes,
technically
ma'am.
a 9th grade class. And so this was offered.
Ms. O'Nation, pull your microphone closer.
Sorry. It was offered in a virtual school situation for those two students at Wallace. It took some doing, but we got that done. And I'm wondering, you know, how expensive that is, and can we not do that on the gifted and talented and some of our advanced programs when they're not but 2 or 3 at a local school, K through 8. So it seems to me that that's
We'll try to bring back some information on that if we can.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Next slide. Looking at this year, and specifically one of the challenges I think we're going to have is we've got a very large class at BIS that will be, assuming that that class will be transferred to Clio next year, potentially Clio will have 181 students in 5th grade. This year they've only got 118, so that's a big population shift in terms of just looking at that 5th grade class. That'll be a very a large class. Right now we've got, I believe, 5 classrooms for 118 students. I believe there's a way to be able to get 6, but if you've got 6 classrooms for 181 children, those are going to be some very large classes.
Clio was constructed for basically 300 students.
Yes, sir. We look at 5th and 6th grade self-contained classes at B.
While we're on that, excuse me just a moment there, we were talking about some schools that have very small classes, like the class numbers. It may be that we need to look somehow at combining some of that. I know we're pretty crowded at Blenheim as well as at Clio, but anyway, there may be. What will the total be with 181 students in the 5th grade? Do you have an idea?
I do, because what will happen is that'll run Clio's numbers up to right at 300. What we're going to find is the lower grades are going to have a lot smaller classes, but the 5th grade classes are going to be very full.
Dr. Lane just showed me the number. It'll be 292.
So they,
Right at.
Very good.
okay, right at the limit.
Yeah,
These numbers that you're sharing with us, they've been pretty consistent over the last 2 or 3 years, so we have no reason to think that anything's going to change, correct? I mean, they're pretty
I think that's correct. I think one of the things when I was looking at the student populations that I thought was interesting is we have a number of grade levels that are below 300, but for example, the current 3rd grade, 345 students, the current 4th grade, 374. So that is the largest grade level that we've got within the district. Then 5th grade, 314, 6th, 315. All the other grade levels, kindergarten through 2nd, as well as 7th through 12th, are all less than 300. So we do have some of our grade levels that have certainly larger populations. Okay, I guess the last item on that slide has to do with our self-contained classes should be with their age-appropriate peers, and presently at BIS we do not have regular ed for 5th and 6th grade, but of course we do have the self-contained there. Okay, now let's take a look at what our actual administration looks like at the various locations, and you can see that what I've done in terms of just classifying administration, just listing the principals and the assistant principals, and then of course the present student count, and that gives you an idea of what we presently have, and you can see at the primary school, we've got a principal, we've got 2 assistant principals, one's for administrative, one's for curriculum. At the intermediate school, we've got a principal and an assistant principal. At Blenheim, we have a principal and 2 assistant principals. At Wallace, we've got a principal and 2 assistant principals. Clio, 1 principal. McCall, a principal and 2 assistant principals. School Discovery, 1 principal. And at the high school, we have a principal, we have a director of athletics. We've got 3 assistant principals for regular classrooms, and then we've got 1 assistant principal for the CATE program.
So
Yes, sir.
at Clio and at School Discovery, you got 1 principal, so
Correct.
who assists them if they need help?
We would need to direct that question to
Because
Ms.
I see everybody
Kane
else
and-
got assistant principals, and you just got 1 principal there, and if something happen, who assists them?
Dr. Lane, would you like to?
Okay, thank you. Okay, when you say a system, are you saying if they're not
Yeah,
there?
why they don't have assistant principal? I mean, if what if they go out sick? Who will be down there?
Okay, if they're ill and they're not there that day, then we send someone from curriculum, from CIA.
So they do have assistants to help them if they dealing with certain things.
Absolutely, we will send a certified administrator, someone who's either certified to be a principal and or have been a principal before, yes. And that's what we've done.
So it's norm that you got 241 students, that 1 principal can handle that school?
Yes, essentially, and actually, and I know the principals would probably not like me saying this, but I have to speak the truth. Actually, based on state standards,
Okay.
1 principal, especially for an elementary school, should be able to manage a school of 500 to 600 students.
Okay.
The State Department's out of their mind, aren't they?
Actually, Ms. Ohanisha, when I was one of those principals, I used to argue with them, and I'll never forget. I was in Mullins as a principal, and we had 575 students, and I used to argue with our accreditation person at the State Department. I can't think of his name now. So can't we have 1 more principal? He said, John, if you had 601 students, yes. Finally, 1 year, believe it or not, and I'll be very brief, I'm not going to go up too much. We got 601 students, and I felt like someone answered my prayers. So then I got an assistant principal.
Are those numbers for prior include children from the DIS?
They do. This is the current enrollment as of January 31, 2018. Okay, next. We take a look at state staffing standards, and the district had a staffing standard study prepared, and that was in 2008, and I do have copies of this if there's any interest in having that redistributed. But give you an idea, the state standard is 375 primary and elementary students to have a full principal. If you have 374, you get a 0.5, according to the state standard. The elementary, middle, 250. High school, they're saying any number of students, you have to have a full-time principal. Looking at assistant principals, in order to get an assistant principal at a primary elementary school, you have to have 600 plus, as Dr. Lane had
That's that 601
affirmed. Elementary, middle, 500 plus, high school, 500 plus, and then of course incrementally 500, 500, 500. So obviously the more students, the more assistant principals you can have. Looking at classrooms, Pre-K and kindergarten, 20 to 1 is the staffing ratio. School-wide grades 1 through 5, 28 to 1 at the primary elementary, of course, outside of the pre-K and kindergarten, and then, of course, the same with the elementary middle. And most middle and high school classes, 35 to 1, state standard. Looking at some of our staffing challenges, next page, we know right off, initial indications show that 30 to 40 teachers will not be returning next year. And there are a number of reasons for that. And of course, the very next bullet there is the end of the Terry program. And I think what we've found is June 30th, 2018, Terry ends. And one of the things that we've also observed is that this year it appears as if those that are coming off of the Terry program tend to be younger retirees, and many of them are mid-50s. And of course, one of the challenges is the fact not only our pay issue, which is a whole nother issue, is the fact that if they continue to work in South Carolina, they're not going to see their retirement increase. So many of them will look at going to North Carolina and actually building a second retirement if they've got 5 years or so to contribute in terms of a teaching or other career. So I think that plays into the numbers. We do have, I really believe that this is probably going to be one of the most challenging years to actually fill the positions that we've got that will be open. And of course, looking statewide and nationwide, there is a real teacher shortage. There's no question about it.
Now, Mr. Park, does it work the same way from North Carolina? Will they be teachers in North Carolina coming out and saying, okay, I'm going to go to South Carolina and get that?
That's correct. And I think one of the things that we benefited from is being a border county. I don't think we would have been able to fill a number of positions last year had we not been a border county. And if we didn't have those folks that are coming from Richmond, Scotland, and Anson counties to provide their services to this district.
I would agree with you, Mr. Parks, except that it seems to be a wash. It seems like they come this way and we go that way, and we need to start looking at letting them come this way and keep this way
Right.
on our side.
Sure, sure.
It's not beneficial to be a border county if you're playing tennis and you're hitting the ball back and forth. We really need to know, I would love to know, how many of these 30 to 40 are retirees, are leaving because they are, quote, retiring, even though we know they're probably not retiring. And
We'll try to bring that information back to the extent that we know it at our next session.
you got letters of intent sent out in January.
Certainly.
So you should know through your letters of intent there should be some.
We've already got indications. We've already gotten indications, and this 30 to 40 is a part of those indications.
But like I said, I'd like to know how many of them are actually Terry. Well, how many people are Terry recipients that are not planning to come back, and how many are Terry recipients that do? Because even though they got the $10,000 cap, we are in a geographically critical area, and that cap would not necessarily apply to us.
Right. We would have to
And we need to advertise that. People need to know that.
We might be fortunate enough to get some non-geographic people in here as well from other parts of South Carolina. Of course, PD, I imagine most of the PD is critical.
Okay, next. All right.
We have budget challenges?
We definitely do. I'll share a few of those with you as we know them right now. Next. Right off, we're going to have a increased retirement cost, and we're talking a couple, probably $250,000 just in the upcoming year. We know that 1% cost increase is going to be significant. The other challenge is we don't know whether or not we're going to receive from the state the previous funding that they provided us to help kind of transition. We received over $200,000 in the current budget year. I don't know whether or not that's going to be in the upcoming budget or not. It's obviously too early, but we'll get some sense of that once the Ways and Means projections come out. But I'm not certain that that's going to happen, and I think there's so many other challenges with, for example, higher education, who have been hit really hard over the last 10 years with the economic downturn and the reductions by the state. I think we're going to see issues that are even associated with things like our nuclear fiasco that the state has been dealing with. I think a lot of the energy has been taken away from the focus of K-12. We've got the whole issue with our retirement system, which is a huge number and is going to continue to take more and more of the state budget. So we've got things like that, as well as, I mean, just even other agencies. Take a look at our emergency management, our police, fire, all those public services that are expressing a lot of the same financial challenges that K-12 is. We know that we're going to see increased health insurance costs, and I'm certain that's going to be at least in the $250,000 range. We've seen reductions in federal funding, and sometimes it's not just the reduction in the federal funding, it's being able to qualify salaries that we previously were able to qualify in prior budgets. So I'm estimating $300,000 there. So just coming out of the gate, before we even talk about retiree compensation, we're $1 million. So these are things I know that we're going to have to address through our budget process. And
I'm
Yes,
not
sir.
up on counting like yourself. So the increased health insurance, what you're thinking along those lines is just the premiums are probably going to go up.
Going to
and
increase.
stuff, right?
Yes, sir.
And increased retirement costs. You're thinking along the lines of what's going to make retirement costs.
We know that there's a requirement that our contribution increases by 1%. And so we'll be on $25 million in compensation. That's $250,000 increase out of pocket for the district.
So it's just like a natural cost of living or whatever. It's just an increase in the salary.
Well, it's really a result of the fact that the retirement system got in such bad shape that they're requiring all the governmental agencies that have employees, of course, that participate, to pay more into the system.
The interest
big
rates
number.
on the funds and the prospect for where they place the money
Yeah.
did not meet expectations. Let me just
correlate.
say that as nice as I can. So they are assessing 1% to try to keep it afloat. And that doesn't
Absolutely.
mean that they might not have to increase that in order to keep paying out retirement. So this is not a cost of living increase. This is a, we got to protect the money we've got and try to pay out what we owe and we've promised these people. Am I saying that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And there are additional increases. Let's see, 2 more 1% increases after the current year that we're in. So we'll see, at least from where we started just last year, we'll see a 5% increase in the cost, in the additional contribution to the retirement system. I mean, we're at the point now where we'll be putting in almost 25% on every dollar. A fourth of what our employees make we'll be putting into the system just to be able to keep it afloat. And that's a combination of being able to pay for the retirement cost, with the checks going out the door for retirees, as well as retiree health insurance, which is another big cost. So employees put in 9% at one point, at some point in time within the next 2 or 3 years, we'll be putting in almost 25% on every dollar. That's
So if I'm looking
huge.
at this $1 million you're showing here on this thing, the only thing that possibly could change would be the prior increased retirement costs. If it is funded by the state, that wouldn't be.
That's correct.
That would be taken off.
That's correct. And one thing I didn't include on this is we're going to see reduction in student counts. Now, I'm hoping that we'll see an increase in the EFA funding per student, but there's no assurance of that. And that could easily add another 250 to even as much as $500,000. If we lose 100 students between last year and this year, and then of course when you look at the weighting, it's about the equivalent of 150, 160 times, roughly $2,500. It's a big number.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Would it be helpful if we go around the room and
Certainly.
ask questions? Ms. O'Nation, would you like to begin?
I missed the very first part, but I looked at it. And of course, we're dealing here with paying our staff and what it's costing overall. We haven't dealt with construction
That is
or
correct.
anything like that for our prospective future, which I know we're all concerned about, but I'm going to save those questions as we're dealing with this right now.
Certainly.
All right, Mr. Woods?
I don't have a question.
Mr. Norton?
Well, I think I've asked, that, I'd like to know the number of possible retirees before we start looking at their compensation. But
Sure.
I sure hope we can do something about that to make this a little bit equal and to see if we can't help in our recruiting efforts and fill these classrooms with certified teachers.
Ms. Fleming? Mr. Driggers?
Well, I've been peppering you as we were going along. I think I've asked most of my questions, but I guess the only thing I can really say from here is, and I hope that you're working on it, give us any alternatives that we can come or you can come up with, because it sounds like we're going to have a few challenges here that we're really going to have to work on. And
I agree.
Whatever you can give us, we surely would appreciate it.
Certainly will.
Ms. Bright?
Well, I know why we trying to save a dollar, but I'm looking at the number of children that's now at the higher school.
Yes, ma'am.
I see that there's not like, all the schools don't have 500 children. So, some of them have less than that, and there's only an assistant principal. So, I would like to see an assistant principal out to Claudia also to help those students. I think there's one person out here might be a little difficult task.
Mr. Coachman?
Nothing at this time.
All right.
Ms. Barton.
All right.
Ms. Fleming?
Mr. Parker, I'm looking at the retirement, and we've talked about it, what the state has not done in terms of being responsible, and yet then we get in our meetings that we want to do more for our retirees. I mean, realistically, how can we do more? I know we want, I go to the new employee orientation every year, and I know there's a lot of cross the line teachers coming in from North Carolina, and that helps us out. And I know we want to help the local people that's retiring, the 40-some people, but wanting to, and then we got $1 million shortage. Sometimes if we just we're just going to have to. Can we do it?
I think one of the big questions is going to be, as we work through the staffing cost at each location, and we've got to be able to reduce our staffing costs. That's the biggest number that we have, and whether or not we need to look at administrative cost or support cost. All of that has to be evaluated as we work through the budget process.
When you say reducing staff, what area do you specifically think that we might need to look at?
Well, we need to apply the standards, the staffing standards, to all of our locations. So
are you talking about administrators? Are you talking about teachers? Are you talking about teacher support? What area are you talking about? Are you talking about principals?
We're talking about all locations, all staff, whether it's administrative support, district, all staff.
Are you talking about the district level too?
All staff, yes, sir.
Mr. Price, I did not. I don't know what answer I'm looking for, but I know I didn't hear it. Maybe you did address it. When we're saying we want to do more in dollar amounts, how much is that? We're saying we want to, increase it from 7 years to, and through meetings, just constantly it comes up, and then,
Let me give you an idea where we are right now. We're paying a maximum of 14 years for retirees, and that is both for administrative support as well as classroom teachers.
What are other districts doing?
I think a lot of other districts have actually dropped that limitations, and particularly for classroom teachers, because it is such a challenge to be able to recruit enough teachers for the classrooms.
Okay, no, wait, let me just follow up what you were saying.
What we're saying is they pay them on their degree as well as their years of experience.
They don't limit them to 14 years. They pay them the full load.
Yeah.
My thing is, who are you going to replace the retirees with? You're going to replace them with full-paid teachers. Now, I know that there will be teachers that are maybe younger and with less years experience. But the bottom line is, if they aren't there for us to replace them with, young, old, or otherwise, we don't have anybody, and we have to pay the teacher full pay that replaces the retiree. It's just, I realize that they are oftentimes at top pay. I realize that too, but I don't know how you pay experience.
Well, one of the things that we have to look at, in my viewpoint, would be, and this, again, it's not in your realm, it's someone else's, human resource or whatever, but, we're going to have to look at online classes, things like that. I mean, I understand the world we're living in right now is a little bit different than when I went to school back there, and I'm not going to say when, but anyway, a little while back. But we have to look at the online classes and things like that, and I don't know if we're looking at that or not, but that's something we're going to have to look at to be able to do that. Yeah.
I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah.
Mr. Park.
Mr. Coachman.
Yes, sir.
So basically, I see you said we got to follow state standards in order to help bring us within the budget when it comes to administration. and making sure that we're at the numbers at the state level. That will help us out.
Well, I think we need to get closer.
Now,
Yes, sir.
in order for us to get closer, I was just looking at the assistant principals across our district within the numbers. That means we would have to cut at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 assistant principals countywide to.
I'm not saying.
I know you're not saying we would have to do that now because the money may come available, but if we can't find the money, if we're going to try to match this standard, that's how many positions will have to be required to leave in order to meet state standards, if that's what we're going to follow.
And one thing I think the district has done a good job of is, as we've had to reduce our staffing costs, we've done that through attrition, and so it's not as if anyone has lost a job, but it could be that if someone leaves, that we just don't replace that particular position if we deem that to be in excess. So,
as Mr. Coachman has pointed out, we have, as a district, made choices to go beyond the state standard because of the needs of our children. And I don't think we're going to change that anytime soon. But certainly, it's very real what you've just said.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yes, sir.
you're looking at the 50 on this state standard.
That would affect every school in the county.
I'd like to say something. In years past, when we had more students and more schools, we did school with one building, one administrative building. We now have 2 buildings, and one of them is not full, but the larger one is full. And the other thought is school takes place in the classroom. And I think we need to remember that the contact between the teacher and the child is the primary thing that we need to tend to. And not have all of these superfluous people, people who hire other people to make their job easier. And that's one of the things government does, is grow itself. And y'all know my favorite expression, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is the classroom. And I think we need to remember that as we look at the staffing issues. It's the classroom, and make sure that is tended to first. And then work our way up from there, having fulfilled those requirements with no chinchiness. And then look at what we're able to do with administrators.
I think it is, and I agree in part of what you're saying, but since we're getting, we get so much funding from different sources, and that has to be, the teacher cannot do that. It's not her job to do that. And I guess in order for us to qualify and to disperse these funds properly, you got to have people there that knows how to do that to keep us out of trouble. So it's going to be a challenge, but we can't just arbitrarily dismiss a position, because we are getting money from a lot of different sources, and they want accountability.
Certainly.
Does anyone have any
And
more
they
questions?
also are getting us grant monies, some of these folks, which we appreciate very much, by the way.
Yeah. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Sure.
I do,
Yeah.
but it's just that
It's a hard reality.
It's complicated. It's not. It's just a lot of different strings that this money's coming in. I mean, people who's administrating it.
Before we start the next meeting, I noticed a couple of people said, "What's with the black cloth?" So you all won't think Dr. Lane and I are preparing for a puppet show. A couple of weeks ago, I had my right knee replaced for the second time. And so my leg may have to dance some under the table. We did this when I had the first knee replacement because it has to dance a little bit. And I didn't want people distracted looking at the leg under the table going boom, 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 boom to keep from hurting. So that's what the cloth is. They were nice enough to put this up for a little while. Okay? No puppet shows.
Ms. Parsons, I may need one too because I steady shake my legs.
All right. So, all right, Ms. Coachman, would you adjourn for us,
Madam
please?
Chairperson, if I may just offer this as food for thought for going forward, as we contemplate the budget, I would ask this esteemed body, this wonderful Board of Trustees, to keep in mind teacher salary. I think we are, what, two
steps behind.
2 steps below the state's current standard and schedule. And if we can just keep that in mind, because it will help with recruitment. So if you keep that in mind.
2 steps below?
Yes.
Okay.
Additionally, I'd like to ask this body to keep in mind teacher supplies and classroom supplies. Even though Ms. Fleming referenced correctly, we do apply for, and we've been the recipient of several grants, but then as Ms. McCall can tell you, many of those grants are item specific. They literally tell us what we can and cannot purchase with them. And there are some instructional supplies that we know the teachers would like to have, so that's just food for thought. Additionally, we want to continue to consider additional funds for general maintenance and upkeep. And believe me, general maintenance and upkeep, just general everyday maintenance, can be expensive. So, but I just want you to keep that on the table. And last but not least, I do want to encourage all of us to keep in mind that, as Mr. Park said, there are no plans for anyone to lose their job just to save money, but attrition is something that we want to keep as a viable option going forward. That's just food for thought. Thank you.
Let me add that food for thought, Dr. Lane. You was talking about how many steps behind we are with teachers. Do you know how many steps we are behind with assistant teachers? Because I know everybody in the district has received a raise except for the assistant teachers over the past few years.
We're 3 steps behind for support and other staff.
That's a little food for thought, too.
Okay.
And may I say thank you for asking that question. I was not aware that there were 3 steps.
3.
Okay, that's. I'd almost move them to the front of the list then, because that's thank you.
Are we ready to adjourn?
I do want to just throw this out too. We've, as a board, we've brought up many subjects. As a matter of fact, I noticed Mr. Coachman put bereavement back on the thing. We talk about and then we don't get to it.
Yeah.
And there's some things that we probably need to look at with this budget that we've brought up many times, and yet whether the budget is going to be impacted by it, so we need to know if we can do it and look at it at this time. One of them's resource officers. One of them is the temp services. Let's see what that is and how much that costs us versus employees. We talked about marquees for at least 2 schools or more. We talked about ball fields several times. We talked about the retirees many times. We talked about cameras or security cameras in the schools many times. And then the AMI cost sounded, I don't know, it sounded extremely high to me for the number of students we serve, but I know you got to have that type of service, but you got to look at all these things, I feel like, because they keep coming up, and we can't deal with them in the middle of a year when you got those kinds of expenses. So if we're going to look at them, let's look at it at this point in time, see how much of it we can take care of.
Let me mention one thing about school resource officer. The governor has got a $5 million recommendation to provide school safety to those economically challenged districts. So that may be a potential for the upcoming year. And one of the things we've seen is that it ties, typically it ends up tying back to the 48 districts that either has either part of the Abbeville case or 80% poverty. So that very possibly will be a source of funding upcoming.
And on that safety issue, 5 million sounds like a lot. It doesn't go real far with all that many, but we need, our principal here at the high school, in terms of the cameras, he says we really need to upgrade what we have here for safety reasons, and we've not gotten a figure on that. And I don't want us to forget, and I know we're not, that Bennettsville Intermediate School is going to need our attention. If it needs some of our funding, then we need to, deal with that. That is a high priority, and it may be something we can do to relieve the 5th grade situation at Clio if we've done something with BIS. So we've got to focus on that in addition to the general maintenance that we're dealing with.
And with that, since we're 1 minute over, Mr. Coachman?
I got one more thing for you. I'm sorry. But we set this up for the meetings before our regular meeting.
Yes, sir.
So I'm just going to ask you right now, is that still going to be okay with you since you started this process?
That's fine.
We will not need to change that on anything?
No,
You think we're
5:30 to
That's all I wanted
6:30.
to know.
Now we're 2 minutes over.
Now I'll make sure we're good with this.
Mr. Coachman, would you please make a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting, this budget discussion meeting.
I second.
All in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And we're about to reconvene. Okay.
Oh, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Okay, all right.
Good,
Hurry.
I need you later.
Okay, everybody hustle.
You ready? You go ahead. I
Got a minute.
Congratulations.